I envisioned China as a place that was more developed, slightly more developed, in terms of their thinking, in terms of how they do things, in terms of how they communicate with other cultures, in terms of how they work. When I came here, to be honest, it was a slight culture shock in terms of those four aspects. I didn't really realize the difference between the Chinese people that I saw in Canada and the Chinese people that I had to work with in mainland China in the last 3 years. So it's really surprising how things are done in China. It's really surprising to see what they think is important and when they decide to do things. And to be honest, I mean, I really do like China still, but there are a lot of things that need to be improved. After being to like other countries like Japan and South Korea, China included, Jamaica, Britain, Trinidad in 2008, you kind of begin to realize that humans are the same despite different cultures. There are some cultural situations that could make people think, okay, well, you know what, we're probably expecting too much because this is a different culture. They have their own way of doing things. However, when it comes to certain things, that is more of a human principle. It's more of a humanity principle, I would say, not so much of a cultural issue. I wouldn't expect China to, in terms of customer service, in terms of how they react or deal with people, how they treat people, how they communicate with others, I wouldn't expect them to be like Canada or America or Britain, because it's a completely different culture. But I would hope, not expect, because expectations are a little bit, it's a little bit too forward. Sometimes it could be used as in a negative way. I would hope that China could try to understand other cultures a little bit more and try a little bit harder to meet their needs. In terms of the difference between, is it a cultural thing or is it an issue of basically foreigners are expecting too much? I know, coming from where I'm from in Toronto and dealing with different cultures as well, I don't want to expect too much of anything. You know, I believe we're, to a certain extent, you think positive. You always hope and admire and pray for the best. But sometimes you have to expect the worst out of people. So when I came to China, I had that mentality in terms of how contracts could be done, labor contracts. And I've seen some really bad contracts in the past 3 years. So I know some things have met my expectations in terms of the negative sense. But I still have seen good things about China as well that didn't meet my expectations. So and this is something that I've learned through traveling, what I do is I stop with expectations. I learned to travel with no expectations, because now that makes life easier. A lot of foreigners, especially coming from Canada or America, they come with expectations and they see something in Africa or in China and they either freeze, they get culture shock, or they're completely livid. Being black in China, this is how I'm going to answer the question. It depends what skin tone. If you're light-skinned black, they may see you as yellow. I have a few former co-workers that some Chinese people, some locals, see them as Chinese. And I'm just scratching my head thinking, are you sure? But to them, they're Chinese because they're light enough to fulfill that yellow skin tone. Now, if you're dark, this is where your reality is going to be different. In China, the 3 years I've been here, and remember, I haven't been here for a completely solid 3 years. I've been in and out of the country. But my tenure that I've experienced here, I've experienced racism, I've experienced fear. I had people and children look at me and run as if they see like a black ghost. I've seen people that are the opposite. They're very nice to me because I am dark, because I'm extremely different from other foreigners that they've seen within their city. So, really, to answer your question, I get reactions completely opposite. Left field, right field. In terms of the job market, it's very tough. Very tough, very, very tough. The job that I just received 2 weeks ago, I spent literally 11 months every day checking my emails, looking for the job that I'm about to go to in 4 days. Oh! so I have to laugh about that one. Okay, so most people, I would say, besides Lance, and even certain people to a certain degree, most people, even the light-skinned ones that are black, don't agree with you, don't understand, don't fully accept it or acknowledge it. Some who witnessed racism in front of me, like as a witness, they're beside me, and they've seen someone treat me bad because I'm dark, given a certain situation. 2 days later, they just forget about it. So, telling other people about it, most likely people are not going to accept it. But here's the funny part. There is white privilege in China, but they don't even see it that way. They're too busy complaining about how dirty China is, or the air pollution, or this or that. They don't see the privilege. They don't feel it. They don't notice it. No. Okay. This is another type of statement that could start a big argument, and I've told a few Americans this in China, and they just don't hear what I'm saying. Racism in Canada is worse than racism in America. 2 reasons. Why? This is a bold statement, but I will say this. Why? Because most Canadians don't admit the fact that racism even exists in our own country. In America, people would at least say that there is some degree of racism. Most people in America would say that, past or present. But in Canada, no one admits it. 2, even if the signs are clear, this is what people do in Canada. They deny it. Oh, the teacher wasn't being racist to Kevin. Kevin's being, he's over-exaggerating as usual. Kevin's being a little bit emotional, So, to answer your question, a black person from Australia or America picking up their bags and going to Canada, that's the last thing they want to do. Ironically, even though a lot of Chinese people don't like me or are afraid of me or don't like black people, somehow, if you hang in your hat and you do the same thing for every day for 10 months, you will find a job in China that will pay you 13,000 RMB a month, and they don't care that you're dark black. What I will say is the best experience in China teaching Chinese people is when you have a class that doesn't care about your skin color, when you have a class that respects you as a teacher, and they actually like you to a certain extent, and there's a language barrier. They don't really understand what you're trying to show them. That's a culture barrier. Sometimes they don't understand what you are saying, but they are trying, and they don't have enough people that can maybe translate to the class, or maybe there's not enough people that can ask you questions, right? But you show them videos, you do demonstrations, you bring props to the class, you show examples of what you want them to do, and sometimes they still don't understand, so they're struggling, they're fighting through. But when the classes that you have, the classes that you teach, and they're trying to understand you, and you're a teacher, right? So you're sweating, you're worried about the class because the class is trying, but you see no results for 5 weeks. And all of a sudden, on the last day, when the assignment is due, it's like they pulled magic from a hat, and you see these beautiful presentations. That gets me all the time. That's a feeling that I still cannot get over, because I'm sweating for most of the term, and these students or these kids or these adults, they pull out the best things I've ever seen. The worst experience was what I had at Shenzhen Maple Leaf. when there was a student that was 3 times the size of another student, had his face on the ground and punching him like a punching bag on the ground. That is something I don't accept, I don't tolerate. I really loathe those type of situations. I hate it. Right.
Okay.
I know some schools do in China, but some schools in other areas don't understand what it means to be a bully. They think it's normal in the classroom. They see it as playing. And coming from Canada, America, we don't see that as playing. We see that as someone being attacked. That is very true. A lot of foreigners do that. But there are some things that are basic, or you could say it's the foundation of the human level. Someone getting punched in the face on the ground, that's not a cultural thing. That's a fact. That's someone getting their butt kicked for no reason, you know. Or maybe there is a reason that I don't know about, because there's a language barrier for me as well. But any physical abuse in any country really should not be allowed. Not because I'm Canadian, but because it's just not right. No one should be getting picked on or getting beaten up in any country. I would say, I haven't been to the city yet, but I would say Hangzhou. It's a second-tier city. Best cities in China, hands down, are the second-tier cities.
Like what?
Hangzhou, well, Dongguan is a red light district, so you don't really want to go there. But Hangzhou, possibly Jinan, even though it's in Shandong province. The new city I'm going to, actually, Wuxi, it's a second-tier city. Changzhou, in the same province. Nanjing, well, Nanjing's the first-tier city, but it's not like Beijing or Shanghai, so prices there won't be that expensive. Qingdao, that's another one. Fuzhou and Fujian province. These are cities that are second-tier cities. Prices are reasonable, and in second-tier cities, you get a chance to understand the Chinese culture, and you can experience some Western commodities if you're into that. You know, some things could look bad. You know, this is more of a situational thing that I'm talking about. Some things can look bad, like where you're living or where you're working, but if you stay positive, eventually you find a way. So that's my take on China. That's the last thing I would say to the viewers. One more thing I would add is China is one of those places where you have an advantage if you can really understand the language and the culture before you arrive. That's the one thing that I wish I would had time to do before I came to China in 2012. I had a handle and a master in the language and a master of the culture before I arrived. That would make my experience a little bit easier as a dark black person living in China.
Freedom is a road seldom traveled by the multitude.